Hello, good evening, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another round of epic and entertaining racing action in the middle of the pack Racing League GTE League for 2026, as brought to you on the Premier Sim Racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. That's right, folks, we're back once again for plenty more Grand Touring endurance car racing action, and we make our way into round number 6 of 8 in the championship. And exactly where are we today? Well, the Euro Cup continues, and we've made our way from Spain to Italy for the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari. Named after the father and son behind the moniker of the infamous Italian manufacturer, this is a circuit which, whilst in the past it was known to be a high-speed, high-reward, high-stakes racing circuit, with safety concerns being very prominent throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, including the very dark day in 1994 with the passing of Roland Ratzenberger on the Saturday and Ayrton Senna on the Sunday for the Imola Grand Prix. Well, this circuit now is more of a stop-start circuit with chicanes added in to what used to be sweeping bends at phenomenally high speeds. But I'll tell you one thing, even though the circuit has been slowed down considerably, the reward and the thrill of going race around here has not been taken away at all. Now it's a stop-start style circuit, where the theme of the game is to outrun your rivals to each and every braking zone. You've also got to be absolutely decisively quick for its corners, with there being so many chicanes, a few hairpins and some sweepers. There's nothing quite like putting a good lap together at Imola, and taking victory around here will feel even more satisfying. Alas, where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this post-round broadcast from Circuit Side, as you tune tonight, catching up with all the racing action as if it were live from Wednesday the 6th of May 2026, but we bring it to you as if it were live today on this Saturday the 16th of May. Therefore, we do not know the outcome of the practice session, which is gradually coming to a close in the background, nor the upcoming qualifying session or the race itself, so it's going to be as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience to you guys and girls tuning in at home. And when you're catching all of this action, of course, it's on YouTube, which you can do every 2 weeks on youtube.com and search for Paul Walsh Productions or PWP, and you can be tuning in there. Why not subscribe today to stay up to date with all the latest racing action from the middle of the pack Racing League series, including, of course, the GTE League. In the content team, if you have myself, my name is Paul Walsh, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action throughout the season. And in terms of our schedule for today, times in Eastern Daylight Time EDT, or Universal Coordinate Time -4, UTC -4, as we can see in approximately around about what will be 7 minutes time. We're making our way into our qualifying session, 10 minutes in duration, or drives out on the circuit looking to go for pole position, after which we'll be then seeing our way to the grid for our 45-minute sprint race. It'll be our 5th sprint race of the season, the 2nd on the European continent. And without further ado, let's bring you up to speed with the story thus far after 5 rounds of racing, not just in the overall standings, but also in the Euro Cup, and also the big headlines from last time out in Spain. And as we can see, we continue our tour around the globe. The first 4 rounds were dedicated to the US Cup, a celebration of American circuits throughout the years, and circuits that have played host to GTE machines throughout their time, and indeed the time of the GTE class from 1999 through to 2023. But last time out, we began the Euro Cup, when we began it in Spain at the circuit de Barcelona, Catalonia. A very familiar circuit to everybody, given its presence in most European racing series calendars, including international calendars such as GT World Challenge Europe, and also the 24-hour series. But what we got to see as the night descended on the Spanish circuit, well, was definitely a lot of difficulty for some and victory for others. The difficulty being it was a very cold day at the Barcelona Catalunya circuit, and that caught out several drivers, not just in qualifying but also in the race itself, including Taylor Buckout in the Pro class and Glenn Bratton in the Pro class. But those who were able to adapt to the cool temperatures as the floodlights went on, well, they definitely thrived. And the ones who thrived the most, well, it was Pro and overall victory for James Logsdon, who missed out on pole position to Ryan Otis by only 1.5 tenths. When push came to shove, how in the race, he got the move into turn number 1, took the lead, and then never let it go, with Ryan Otis never falling more than 1.5 seconds behind and saving his fuel and tyres much more efficiently than Logsdon. But Logsdon in the end was able to hold on in an absolutely defiant drive to victory and became the 5th overall winner and the 5th Pro winner in 5 rounds. We've yet to have a repeat winner overall and in the Pro class. Meanwhile, in the Pro class, we only had 2 drivers on the grid there, Glenn Bratton and Tom Bryce, of course, with the promotion of our Pro-Am Cup winner from the US Cup of none other. And then what was your driver, as I just double checked to make sure I get my names correct here, of Jermaine Warren, with Jermaine Warren jumping his way up into the Pro class for round 5 onwards, and therefore the game plan was all about seeing which of Bryce and Bratton would be taking home that Pro-Am win, and in it was Tom Bryce. And the decisive moment, well, a major mistake early on the race for Glenn Bratton, who had taken the pole position in class, and in the end Bryce made the least mistakes of the pair of them and was able to bring home that key result at a 2nd class win of the season for him. But here we come then to today. It is time for round number 6. We are here at the Imola Grand Prix circuit, and it's another sprint race round that confronts us. And after this, we'll have our final sprint race round of the season, and that'll be on the 20th of May at Silverstone's Grand Prix circuit in the United Kingdom, after which we're making our way to Belgium for the infamous and venerable Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. But as we roar away into this round, well, of course, we brought you up to speed with the headlines from last time out, but let's bring you up to speed with the championship standings as well after 5 rounds of racing. And here we can see, starting with the overall Drivers' Championship standings, on the left-hand side, you have your Pro class, and this is for all 8 rounds over the course of the season, with 1 drop score factored in, and it's James Logsdon who leads by a grand advantage, now to the best part there of 17 points, ahead of his closest rival of none other than Chad Henson. Henson was not on the grid last time out. We hope to see him back in the near future. He's not on the grid here today, unfortunately, either, so therefore he will now be starting to add 0 scores to his campaign. Shahi Zahir still holding on to 3rd place, and what a round it was for Shahi Zahir as well. If James Logsdon and Ryan Otis had a brilliant duel in the Spanish sunlight, whatever there was left of it, to be able to go for the win, well, the battle for 3rd place was also absolutely staggeringly rapid, whereby Shahi Zahir in the end got the upper hand versus Matthew Morhart, but it was back and forth between the two of them, and in the end it all came down to an error from Matthew Morhart towards the end of the race, which saw him spin out of 3rd place when Zahir was pushing hard after him, and Zahir was able to bring on home that spot on the podium and therefore push forward his campaign in 3rd place. Matt Best sits in 4th, wasn't quite on the pace last time out in Spain, sits a further 6 points behind, but he's still slightly ahead of Taylor Bookout, and we do have Ryan Otis matching the points of Bookout and looking 4th to try and promote himself into the top 5 as of today. Matthew Morhart not too far behind on 127 points there, and it's a further 10 to Julian Jones, with Jermaine Warren completing the run of the top 10, and 114 points 2 ahead of Gabriel Ferreira and also Eric Lagai, and then we do have Blake Phillips, Jason Landry, Edwin Offred, and David Adiyi completing the pro standings. As for your primes on the right hand side of your screen, we can see that Donald Cepek still leads after missing the previous round, and he is going to miss this round as well. He has not made the journey to Italy, so we are going to be seeing a brand new Prime Championship leader after this round. But will it be Bryce or will it be Bratton? Will you tell me, ladies and gentlemen, because we'll see them at the finish line. Mark Sengel, meanwhile, 39 points behind, and right now not quite in the hunt at the time, and not on the grid for this round either. And the same can be said for Roger Ganesh, Carl Peterson, and Bill DaCosta, and we do hope to see them back on the grid in a future race round. And of course, that very tight fight for the very top of the Prime Class Championship, always a big fault, as it is the battle for the Pro honours as well in the overall Championship standings. But then we come to the Euro Cup standings, and after one round, remember the Euro Cup is based on rounds 5 through to 8. None of the rounds are droppable, so therefore you've got to score big in each of the 4 rounds on the European continent. And we can see that James Logsdon has taken the initial lead by 2 points ahead of Ryan Otis, and it's a further 4 points to Shahi Zahir. Matthew Morhart and Jermaine Warren complete the top 5, and Taylor Bookout and Matt Best complete the running order with all 7 of those pro drives on the grid last time out, and Tom Bryce taking the initial advantage by a single point over Glenn Bratton, but will it stay that way after today? We'll have to wait and see. But with ourselves brought up to the standing spec, well, let's bring you up to speed now with the circuit we're going racing at today. Here's, of course, the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Dino Ferrari's Grand Prix layout. The layout that is typically used for most motorsporting events, unless it's motorcycles that visit it, and the difference being there's a chicane at Viarentia Bassa at turn 16. But otherwise, the circuit is exactly the same, whether it's on 2 wheels or 4. And a huge thank you to iRacing.com, not just the brilliant simulator provided, but also the absolutely fantastic track maps contained within it. Now, at its core, this circuit, located near the city of Imola, from which it takes its name, or the nickname we should really say, or the more colloquialised name, of course the full name of the circuit at the very top, in honour of the founding father and his son from Ferrari, that being of course Enzo and his son Dino. Dino sadly passing away before Enzo, so the circuit was originally known as the Autodromo Internazionale Dino Ferrari, and it was extended to become the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Dino Ferrari when Enzo Ferrari passed away. But this circuit, a very challenging one in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, and the whole thought process around this circuit, simply put, is that you need to nail your corner exits and the ability to outrun your rivals down the long straight and be brave in the braking zones at the other end. And as our drivers take on this circuit, well, what they'll find is they'll roar the way through the curvature at turn 1 and in towards Tamburello chicane at turns 2, 3 and 4. It'll be left, right, left through there, the medium speed chicane, which then gives way to another shorter straight as they make their way into the second chicane of Villeneuve at turns 5 and 6. It'll be very tight to that left-hander before open up the right and get it right, and they'll roar the way up the hill towards Tosa Hairpin at turn 7, where there the game plan is to abuse the slight camber in the road to make sure you get the best possible exit in the low-speed corner. Out of the hairpin, it's over the rise to one of the highest points of the circuit at Piratella Bend at turn number 8, where they'll come through the sweeping slightly off-camber left-hander sweeper, and then down the hill they come in towards Aqua Minerale, a chicane in its own right, for some would say. Then through the double right into left-hand King at turns 9 and 10, before they make their way back up a rise and in towards Variante Alta. The fourth of the chicanes of the circuit, we'll see our drivers have to negotiate a right into left, the tightest of the chicanes, very high curbing between the apexes as well, which can easily unsettle a car, but get that right, they'll come down through the kink of 13 and in towards the bend at turns 14 and 15. Now it's going to be about being as late as possible on the brakes in the downhill braking zone and making sure you nail those late apexes, with turn 14 being entirely downhill on approach but flattened out at the exit. I mean, on turn 15 a completely flat corner by comparison unless you hit the apex curb, but of course get the perfect launch out of there and you go through the kinks of 16 and 17 to complete the lap and do it all over again at full speed, alternatively finally find that checkered flag. A quick reminder of the rules before we do go racing. In this series, drivers are running a fixed setup as provided by the Middle of the Pack Racing League administration, with fuel loads restricted to 50%. Qualifying wise, an open qualifying format shall be used where all the drivers are out on circuit together, and therefore they need to be mindful of one another, but they can always pick up a cheeky draft off each other or work together with teammates to try and pick up a tow. Now, sprint race wise, the race shall start via a rolling start, as it's an edition of GTE class racing, and each driver has one fast pair available should they need to use it by visiting the pit lane. Alternatively, they may be forced into the pit lane if they've picked up too many instant points. Get to 10 and you will receive a drive-through penalty. Indeed, we're very strict on those instant points here at the Middle of the Pack Racing League. Without further ado, that's perfect time for us to now make our way back to circuit side, and as we do, the sun coming up here, it is time for qualifying, and it is go, go, go for 10 minutes of qualifying. But who exactly is going to put themselves on pole, we will see as the first car starts to make their way out of the very long pit lane, and it is going to be James Logsdon who's the very first to make his way out onto the tarmac. Now, intriguingly, qualifying is going to be important here. This is not an easy circuit to overtake at. Now, you may be sat there thinking, but surely it should be an easy circuit to overtake at, or at least find opportunities. Again, you've got several heavy braking zones. Well, you would be right. However, the problem here at Imola is the fact that at the end of those heavy braking zones are corner complexes, whereby unless you are fully alongside going into the corner complex, typically you're not going to be able to make a move. So this is one of those circuits where you have to be relentlessly on the back of the rival you are chasing. You have to pressure your rivals into a mistake, and for those who are trying to lead, you need to have an outright pace advantage. But of course, with there being plenty of curves, plenty of what is exit runoff areas as well, this is one of those circuits where you need to use every millimetre of the road, because it can be the difference between victory and indeed defeat, or in the case of qualifying, the difference between pole position or you qualifying on the second or third row of the grid. And particularly for our pro drivers such as Taylor Bookout and also Eric the Guy, who's back once again. Great to see the Rexy man with the AO Racing tribute livery heading on around. Well, right now the number 6 driver all fired up, and he'll be hoping that he's being able to score a big result here today, as results haven't always come his way. Indeed, the last time it all did go very wrong was at Watkins Glen in the dark there under the floodlights, although I do believe we're going racing throughout the daylight today. Although we have enjoyed the nighttime rounds as well, we do love to be able to see the liveries of the cars every so often in natural lighting. And what Eric the Guy making his way on through, ooh, that didn't go quite right at all, and getting it wrong at the auto chicane, hits the barrier, and that's very quickly going to be a tow to the pit lane there. So he'll get himself back out once again, and there's the proof in the pudding how easy it is to make a mistake around here, as Matthew Morehart makes his way onto his first flying lap, although this will be more of a banker lap, given the fact he's weaving his way onto it. It's nowhere near carrying enough speed to really go for an out-and-out fast lap. But to be fair, with only 10 minutes on the clock, and with the lap time round here being just under 2 minutes, understandably there's not going to be too many laps available for our drivers. This is definitely going to have a feel of the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya to it, in terms of the length of lap time, and the fact that our drivers will only really get in around 5 flying laps. It sounds like a lot when you consider the first one, or the first 2 would be banker laps, and then the last 3 are really going to be push laps. This is not easy, plus the fixed setup as well, which means that 50% fuel tank, you cannot adjust it as a team. You have to take that fuel in the car going into qualifying. So for Eric the Guy, a tow to the pit lane is actually going to hurt him massively, because it means he puts the fuel back in the car. We reset the fuel load in the car every time, as per the iRacing rules and regulations for fixed setup spec racing, and it does therefore mean he has 1 extra lap of fuel, and a heavier car means typically a slower lap time. At least that's the theory, because you're carrying more weight with you. But meanwhile, we look to the Pro-Am class. Here's Tom Bryce, the 272 driver, and well, with his second win of the season last time in the Lazy Boy Privateer machine, can he make it a 3rd win this time out, or will it be Glenn Bratton in the 289? The BMW M8 driver, one of only 2 BMW M8s on this grid, the other one being Shahi Zaher, albeit he's in the Pro class for Arrive and Drive, as Bratton makes way around there in the Privateer Blue Ribbon machine. It's good to see them out there giving their role in the German Mark, the only front-engine rear-wheel drive car that's available in the GT class on iRacing. Of course, there were others over the years that did compete in the category in real life, including the car that we definitely are missing in iRacing. We'd love to see the Aston Martin V8 Vantage GTE, and also a car from a bit earlier on in the time of GTE racing, some of you may remember it, and that being none other than the Dodge Viper from all those many years ago. There was also the Corvette C7R, but of course that has been supplanted by the Corvette C8R GTE, which is available on iRacing. The first Corvette in racing history to put the engine in the middle of the car. Indeed, normally breaking away from the Corvette norm, we should say, of having the engine in the front, but still working out quite nicely for the teams over the years. But we do have American muscle here in the form of an EcoBoost machine, and that is Julian Jones, who's back once again. Good to see him out there in the Fast and Furious racing livery machine. A tribute to Paul Walker across the top window banner, and he's in the Pro class, although making a bit of a ham sandwich of the Tamburello chicane. Not having the best of times through there, and we're just trying to get himself set up for his second flying lap, but that's going to now require him to abort that lap and get ready for his next one. But good to see the Ford GT out there, and well, of course, ladies and gentlemen, we all have a little bit of EcoBoost, do we not? And particularly Julian Jones there, making his way on around in the much fabled and much enjoyed Ford machine, which, of course, when it did return to endurance racing, the best part of around about 10 years ago, if my memory serves me correctly, where it definitely caused a stir, and it saw a revival in Ford's fortunes when it came to racing, particularly in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But as he heads on down the hill, we will very shortly be getting an on-board lap with one of our drivers. And well, I can definitely feel the need to EcoBoost arising in me, ladies and gentlemen. And well, this car definitely does things to everyone who spectates it. If you weren't aware of what happened in one of our broadcasts earlier in the season, EcoBoost fever kicked in. And right now, Julian Jones feeling the flying pace of the car. But as Ryan Otis makes his way towards the timeline, we jump on board with him for a flying lap as he takes us around the Imola Grand Prix circuit. He's made his way down towards turn number 2 in his Porsche 991 RSR as he looks over his right side for his brake marker. Braking at the Marshalls post, 160 metres from corner apex, down a third gear. Now switching from left to right to left as he flows with the contours of the road. Nice and tight there through turn number 4. And then gives you the best line as he now makes his way up towards Villeneuve. Looking towards his right-hand side, braking there at what will be around about 75 metres. Trail braking down to 4th, and now will he drop to 3rd? He will at the apex of turn number 6. He's all of the run-off curve, and now up towards Tosa Bend. Braking about 150 metres from corner apex, all the way down to 2nd gear. Does not drop to 1st to avoid a wheel spin, and now making his way up the hill towards Piratella Bend. At this point, it's been a good lap so far, but now comes the real technical test. Can he nail the speed he needs for the downhill left-hander? 5th gear will drop to 4th, drops to 3rd, makes his way through the left-hander, 2 gears down. Now going back up the gearbox here in towards Aqua Minerale. Here it's either dab the brakes and chuck the car in, or lift off the throttle and throw it in. Does the latter, and then hard onto the brakes all the way down to 2nd gear, and now powering his way over the crest and in towards the Alta chicane. It's a small bit of breathing room before he goes through the low-speed chicane, braking there at what will be about 75 metres from corner apex, coming all the way down to 2nd gear, clattering the curves as much as he dares to abuse them. And coming out of the corner, keeping 2 wheels in the white line. It's been a good lap so far from Otis, and heading down. Well, he's currently gone purple in the first 2 sectors. Final sector, he's building himself up. Getting to go onto the brakes into Ravazza 1. Braking about 130 metres from corner apex down to 2nd gear. Turning into the final major corner here at Ravazza 2. And as he comes now, battling with power oversteer as he roars his way down. And the Porsche 911 RSR screams its way towards the line. It's been a good lap from Otis, but how good is it going to be? As he crosses the line, he was the 1 minute 40. And well, that's going to improve by 6 tenths, a 39.486, a monster lap there from the number 3 driver, and Ryan Otis will take that provisional pole position even further. We'll have to wait and see whether anybody can respond. Remember, Ryan Otis, your winner from round number 4. Well, right now he's trying to become the first repeat winner of the Pro and overall category. Shahin Zahair squeezes his way between Otis and Logsdon. Eric Lagai, meanwhile, well, here is Lagai right now, making his way down towards turn number 2. And, well, the number 6 driver right now, at least, definitely not finding any more time out there. He's got to find some soon because this qualifying session is almost at an end. As Glenn Bratton has improved, got a lap on the board. Matthew Morehart has yet to get a lap on the board house. We do have 9 drivers here today, but Morehart has not set a valid representative time. And Bryce and Bratton very close to each other, although Tom Bryce cheekily following Bratton around here, trying to essentially get a bit of a distant tow, which will help him on the straights. And that can be worth up to 4 tenths of a second a lap, depending on how well he nails taking the slipstream on. So Bryce following, and as he does so, will Glenn Bratton just in front. And he's way into the braking zone here, and will the BMW, it'll be very quick on the straights and the acceleration zones, but it will struggle a little bit through the chicanes compared to the Porsche. The Ford GT as well will be interesting. The Ford is expected to be quite quick through the sweepers, and particularly the faster chicanes, such as Tamburello and Villeneuve, but likes of all-turn Aqua Minerale really will be the bane of the Ford GT and also the BMW M8's existence. Both cars, they don't enjoy low speed rotation compared to medium speed, and particularly when you're front mid-engine at rear wheel drive, so that's where the engine is mounted ahead of the driver, but it's mounted as far behind the front axle as possible to centralise the weight distribution. Well, that's a way of overcoming the downside of front engine rear wheel drive, which is a lot of understeer on the front end because the weight's pushed forward, but understandably it's still ahead of the car. It's not in the middle or behind the car, if you will. But lap time's improving. Ryan Otis, meanwhile, is looking absolutely untouchable. At the top, he's gone even faster at 39.019. Matthew Morhart, meanwhile, he only needs one lap on the board, and suddenly he's up to second place. So Morhart doing a very impressive job as he makes his way onwards, and as he does so, how much faster can he go? As Eric the Guy slightly improves and puts himself back in the second place by only 400. This is definitely very back and forth at the moment as Shahi Zahir goes on to one last tour of the circuit. And as he does so, the racing driver from Sri Lanka, well, he's doing very well in the BMW right now to get himself up there as Julian Jones sets a 40.850. Well, this is not looking as though it's coming the way of Jones. So I suspect the number 69 driver right now, as much as the door number is nice, right now this qualifying session is looking anything but nice. 30 seconds left to go, and will anybody else get another lap in, and one will they improve? Well, Ryan Otis right now, he is going even quicker. Well, he's trying to. His opening sector has improved by a further tenth, but his middle sector has been down by a tenth, so it's all cancelling out. He's going to need to do something quite spectacular then in the last couple of corners as the privateer makes his way on down the hill. As the clock comes to zero in 3, 2, 1, and 0. Well, that is qualifying complete, and now in overtime, they'll be allowed to complete the laps they are on, and Ryan Otis will be the first to complete his final qualifying lap that he's on. Of course, we do have Taylor Bookout and Eric the Guy in the pit lane, and Otis decides he's done enough. He doesn't need to do anything more. So then it will be now to Matthew Morhart. Can he find a way to move himself onto the front row? The answer is no. He's not happy with that lap. He comes into the pit lane. Shahi's ahead the same, so they're all seemingly not improving. James Logsdon, meanwhile, he has improved. Middle sector's up. Also, his final sector's looking good. So here he comes towards the line. Can he get himself onto the front row of the grid? The answer is no. He improves by 1.5 tenths, but he keeps in fifth for 40.060. Only what is 900ths of a hair's time. And meanwhile, Tom Bryce makes his way out to the final corner, leading Chrome driver. And right now, 4.5 tenths faster than Glenn Bratton. Bratton had it off, so he is towed to the pit lane. And I believe Julian Jones had a bit of a moment going through Alta in towards turn 13. So this will be the last lap we see in qualifying, and Tom Bryce sets a 41.378. It is a further half a tenth faster than his previous best, so therefore he does cement himself as the Pro-Am pole sitter. And just like that, qualifying has completely flown us on by, ladies and gentlemen. And more in 10 minutes, we have seen some brilliant laps, but in particular, a monster lap from Ryan Otis to take the overall and pro pole position by 9 tenths ahead of Eric Lagai. And then we will see Matthew Morhart and Shahi Zahir on row number 2. In the Prime class, it's going to be 8th place to the pole sitter Tom Bryce, and then in outpacing Glenn Bratton, doing to him what Bratton did to him back at the circuit of Barcelona, Catalonia, in taking that pole position by a good couple of tenths. But whether it will stay that way or not in the race, we'll have to wait and see. But the good news is we haven't got long to wait as the circuit falls silent here for a brief moment at Imola, but we'll be making our way to the grid very shortly, and when we do, we'll tell you how they're all going to line up for our one and only race in round number 6 of the championship. And taking a big gulp of water there to make sure we're fully hydrated in the commentary booth in preparation for the exciting racing that is ahead. And remember, just because we have 9 drivers on the grid does not mean you are going to be lacking in quality action. Indeed, we really have seen at the middle of the pack racing league over the years that regardless of the numbers that take to the grid, it's always quality racing. And the excitement in Spain last time out really proved that with the battles all the way through the field. As the drivers battled with the circuit as much as they did with each other at certain points. But this circuit definitely rubbed it in. Imola, you can see that really noble black line there, the racing line, going through the Alta chicane. But without further ado, as they make the way to the grid, this is how drivers will line up for round number 6 of the Middle of the Pack Racing League GTE League for 2026, brought to you on iRacing, and this is the second round in the Euro Cup part of the series. And Ryan Otis takes pole position here at the Imola circuit in Italy, pole position on 39.019 by 9 tenths ahead of Eric Lagai. On row at number 2, It's going to be Matthew Morhart, who in the end could not find a way to stop Eric Laguy from enjoying his best qualifying performance of the season to line up on the front row, but Morhart doing very well to start in third, only was 400ths behind if that. Shahi Zahair was a further 17 thousandths behind. He'll start fourth place, and behind the arrive and drive privateer will be Team Bear coach James Logsdon. And Logsdon not quite on the pace here today, but keep an eye on the course. They're all Porsches minus Zahair's car right now in that running order, therefore he'll be hoping that he can find some pace to match those in front of him. Taylor Bookout starts in 6th place, a bit off the pace compared to the top 5, away by 4 attempts, but to be fair, he was 4 attempts faster almost than Julian Jones, and it does seem as though that right now that Ford GT not looking comfortable for the 69 driver. Tom Bryce starts as your prime pole sitting in 8th place, the privateer. He was 5 attempts off of Jones this time, but in turn, he was almost 4 attempts faster than Glenn Bratton, who'll be your last starter on this grid, taking 9th place, and that's how they'll all line up, ladies and gentlemen. Well, all the drives are almost set and ready to go, and it is an absolutely packed grid here, down towards what we Acca Minerale, as they all get themselves set. Well, the grid is complete, and now we do get our formation lap underway. But as the automated safety car gets ready to pull off, well, Ryan Otis will be the one to follow it away, as we briefly sit on board with him for the formation lap. It's a partial formation lap, not the full lap of the circuit. Indeed, it's only going to be the back end lap, so therefore we won't be seeing them initially do what is the full 3.05 mile course under what will be a much more controlled pace. But don't you worry, because the next time they come around, there'll be a full pace attacking the 3.05 mile circuit. And this is definitely going to be a thriller when they go green flag racing. But as Ryan Otis leads the field round, well, of course, he knows that he needs to make sure he gets a good start and not let anybody jump him in towards the opening braking zone. That's what Logsdon did in Spain, and it proved to be the deciding factor in their battle. But here today, Otis once again taking that pole position by a much larger margin compared to in Spain. And you'd be hoping by taking that pole position by almost 4 times the margin is going to increase his likelihood of winning the race by 4 times. Or at least mathematically, that's how it may work out in theory. But the reality could be very different as the field heads on along. And Taylor Bookout, we definitely struggled in the cool conditions in Spain. But here, a warmer circuit today, and we can see on the right-hand side of the screen, the fact we have a track temperature of 79 degrees Fahrenheit, 78 degrees Fahrenheit being the ambient temperature. It is a bit warmer, and this circuit will warm up as time goes on. And that will be to the benefit of several drivers out there as they all make their way through Ravazza, and as they do, we'll be over to Ryan Otis to let the safety car go, and will it take us away for 45 minutes of racing action at the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari. And it's lights down, away we go from round number 6 of the championship as the drives roar the way down towards turn number 1 for 45 minutes of racing action. But as they do, heading towards the opening braking zone with battles in the mid-pack, as we do see Matthew Morhart and Shahi Zahair fighting. Or he's Zahair trying to go outside to inside here. They give each other plenty of space. They come in towards turn number 4, but James Logsdon trying to hang on to the back there, but Morhart does squeeze his way back ahead. Now will Logsdon be able to get a move on Zahair coming into that braking zone? Perhaps no, not at this time. He's going to try it, but that's not going to work out at all as Zahair going to the inside there, gets squeezed a little bit up onto the apex of turn 6, but through Villeneuve, that's okay. He has to fall back in now, and he can't fight that anymore, at least for this open lap of today. Julian Jones had a decent start behind Taylor Bookout still. Tom Bryce and Glenn Bratton together. You can see Jones now trying to think about a move in towards Piratella Bend. I don't think that's going to work initially at this time, as much as he'd love to try and make the move here. I think he's going to need to warm up those tyres and brakes just that little bit more before he can start to be aggressive. The sweeping bends are going to be where that Ford GT works, but of course for every sweeping bend you've got 2 or 3 low speed bends, and that does go against the grain of the Ford GT machine. The front, Ryan Otis, after taking that pole position, he's leading currently, but he's not pulling that much of a gap initially. But I suspect, compared to qualifying pace, he'll be turning the pace down quite significantly. And that's not to try and play with his rivals behind, but to try and save the fuel and give himself as much of a strategic advantage as possible. If he can very gradually make a break, if per lap he can open up a 3 tenths of a second advantage to gradually break the toe by saying 2 to 3 laps time, then that will feel very rewarding in itself, and he'll protect the car a bit more. Shahi Zahair continues to follow James Logsdon. Right now, no change since being passed by Logsdon, although he is definitely staying right behind him as they make their way almost towards another lap. So after one lap of racing, it's Otis who leads, over one in pro, ahead of Eric the Guy. And then we do have in third, 7 tenths behind. It's Matthew Morehart ahead of James Logsdon. Then Shahi's ahead, sits in fifth currently, and the BMW driver trying to get closer and closer. But the gap seems to be open a little bit, and Taylor Bookout, meanwhile, has got Julian Jones looking increasingly threatening for that the sixth place, but Jones still not able to find a way to attack. Tom Bryce, he sits in eighth, your Pram leader, with Glenn Bratton following right behind, and Bratton right now looking for an opportunity to get involved as Bryce goes round, and it goes all the way to the gravel, and I believe, who's that with? Is that Taylor Bookout getting it wrong? It is. Both Bryce and Bookout both getting it wrong. They're coming out of Tamburello. I'll to get a replay of that shortly, but the Bear Poke driver in particular really ended up in the weeds, and I think Bryce then to react to that, and well, we didn't quite see how it all started. We've got to see the ending, and Glenn Bratton takes the Pram lead as a result of it. And Julian Jones moves up into sixth place, but a very odd story there, and I suspect that might just be weight distribution and transfer catching a couple of the Porsche drivers out as Ryan Otis makes his way down the hill on some rather wide flowing lines there. I think Otis right now just taking it nice and easy with regards to the steering inputs of the car and just making sure he's not too aggressive. I think he's worried about the fact that right now at least this car may still be trying to warm itself up a little bit, and he was trying to warm up with it. Bounce his way over the curves there, through the auto chicane, no trouble. James Logsdon trying to close Matthew Morehart a little bit as we ride on board with your fourth place man in the 42. And well, the Team Bear Poke driver here staying glued to the back of his rival, but understandably, he wants to go a little bit further. He'd like to be on the podium, and that way he can try and extend his championship lead even further and more quickly. He'd like to wrap it up before the season finale if he can. Everyone would as a championship contender, but understandably you can't always get what you want, and therefore you've got to try and settle with the results that you can carve out. Although he has still got the presence there. Shahi's a hair behind as we look from the rear of the number 42, and everyone's setting the new fastest lap at the moment, and then Shahi's hair sets a personal best. That goes to show you that everyone right now driving most likely around about 90% pace. They're just trying to protect the tyres, and tyre degradation will be a big factor here at Imola. This is an aggressive circuit for tyre wear, particularly on the right-hand side tyres. It is a anti-clockwise circuit, which means there's more left-hand turns than right-hand turns, so it's always the outside tyre that takes the greatest wear, and therefore the right-hand side tyres will take the bigger wear. Now, at the same time, you do have to consider the fact we do have complexes such as Aqua Minerale, which will lean very heavily on the left-hand side tyres, particularly the front left tyre. Even in the mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars, it will feel a lot of pressure because it's a downhill braking zone. You're compressing all the way to the car onto a single tyre, and it's that front left quarter of the car that takes the biggest beat in there. So therefore, tyre distribution, or in terms of tyre wear, will actually be quite fair. You will have a little bit more on the right side of the car, but not too much. The traction zones out, that's where you will see a lot more wear on the rear right tyre compared to the rear left tyre, and that should be a big factor, particularly when our drivers make the way out of corners such as a Ratsa 2. Well, they need to really push that rear right tyre as much as humanly possible, given all these cars are rear wheel drive. All the power goes to the rear wheels, the front wheels do all the steering work. But as Matthew Morehart finds that James Logsdon is inching closer and closer, we ride on board looking back for the rear of the number 10. Right now, Morehart doing everything right so far, at least, holding the third place. He keeps there at the guy. The guy is gradually losing Ryan Otis. Otis is trying to drop him. That lead gap not quite going beyond the second yet, but it's almost there now. It's currently 9.5 tenths, moving towards about 9.7 tenths. And if it goes any further, once they get beyond the second, the slipstream factor between these cars starts to become less egregious. And indeed, when you get within a second, you really do notice the toe. These cars, of course, compared to the modern-day GT3s that replace them, much more aerodynamically designed. The efficiency of them is a bit higher, and it means they pick up a huge toe off each other when they are drafting, and that's what you see on the straights. The idea is you want to make that break. The guy, meanwhile, really right now starting to feel the pressure of Morehart, but James Logsdon's there as that gap finally does start to trip towards a second now. Otis seems to be starting to make the break here. Going out to build up. Big move out the inside of Morehart. It's a lock up on the front left brake, and in the end, I think he wanted to go for it, then thought about not going for it, but by the time his brain had said don't do it, his body had already started doing it, and in the end, Matthew Morehart, well, he managed to avoid making contact there, but definitely had to lock up the front brake in order to make sure he did not hit Eric the guy and got the car stopped in time before it ran very wide. Well done to him, but understandably, James Logsdon will take that place off him just like that. Well, one small mistake, and Sonny opens up the battling for second, third, and fourth place with Shahi's hair still watching on, and Julian Jones slowly falling away from that group. The pace is just not there right now on the Ford GT, although he is matching Shahi's hair's times. We believe that Zahair is actually taking it quite easy at the moment and just sitting on the back of the group and trying to fuel save. But speaking of drivers right now, We're not taking it easy. Taylor Bookout looking for a move here on Glenn Bratton. And remember, drivers across two different classes are encouraged to fight each other as well as fight against each other's classmates. The reason being you score points based on your overall finishing position first and foremost in the Middle of the Pack Racing League, and then you score bonus points in the Pro-Am class for what is first, second or third on the podium. It's 3 points for first, 2 for second and 1 for third. But otherwise you take home the points that you score from your overall position, and that's why beating a pro as a Pro-Am driver is just as crucial as Pro-Ams trying to, well, it's just as pros at beating Pro-Ams there, because it all factors into their championship campaigns, including in the Cup as well as much as the overall championship. But a new fastest lap of the race, a 39.52. And I think Ryan Otis, now that he's got the gap beyond the second, aided somewhat by what was Matthew Moorhart's lock-up in towards Toaster Hairpin, which may have just cost Eric Laguy a little bit of extra time. Ryan Otis has now decided to put the hammer down for a couple of laps. It will cost him some fuel, but if he can open up that gap and give himself, say, 3 to 4 seconds of an advantage, that's a much harder advantage to then close down through fuel saving compared to 1 to 2 seconds. Taylor Bookout all over the back of Bratton still. As he makes his way through, we ride aboard the dashboard here of the Team Bear Poke driver, and we're looking for an opportunity to get involved. But will he be able to do so? The answer, at least for now, is no. Glenn Bratton doing a very good job, to be fair, of not making any mistakes. And as he makes his way up towards Pirosella Bend, keeping that BMW firmly on the black stuff, which is all part of the game, but these cars are not easy to drive. Remember, you are driving a car that is outputting around 600 brake horsepower to the rear wheels, has a lot more aero compared to a GT3, but also is a bit of a lighter car by comparisons. These cars, they can very quickly snap on the driver, plus also they have no anti-lock braking system, no ABS. They do have traction control, but no ABS, so you're the one as a driver who has to modulate the brakes, and that was at the core of why these cars were essentially retired from racing. There were a couple of major reasons, two of them. The first one being the fact that these cars were seen as a bit too challenging for gentlemen or lady racers, i.e. when we say that, we're not talking in a derogatory term, but the term gentleman or lady racer if it's someone who essentially is a rookie or a Pro-Am or an Am driver who buys the way into racing, does not perhaps come up through the grassroots level, but of course everyone is entitled to come into motorsport each and every way. The other reason is the cost of running a GT versus a GT3 being a bit higher, but here comes Taylor Bookout getting the better run out of Ravazza too, as he now looks up the inside, making the way in towards Tamburello. Well, Glenn Bratton's going to see him fight it from outside to inside here, but on the brakes, the BMW doesn't quite have the leverage still compared to the Porsche, and in the end, Taylor Bookout makes that move for 7th place. But Glenn Bratton did very well to keep him behind for several laps. Well, Bratton right now still leads in the Pro-Am class, and he'll be happy with that. Further behind, here's Tom Bryce, the man who lost it all, coming out to Tamburello early on in the race. We are going to get a replay of that shortly and explain what exactly happened to him. But right now, on the recovery drive, and gradually closing down Glenn Bratton at a rate of approximately 2 to 3 tenths a lap. And it is an 8.5 second gap currently. So if you do the mathematics there, he will be there towards the final 15 to 10 minutes of the race. But meanwhile, oh, that goes around for Eric Laguy. Laguy losing it coming out of that Quid of Raleigh. We could not have timed that better. We promise you that was not scripted, ladies and gentlemen. And well, Eric Laguy losing it coming out of that Quid of Raleigh. Easy place to get it wrong. And suddenly he drops out of 2nd place. And for Eric Laguy once again in a commanding position for a podium. And it all slips out of his hands. It's Watkins Glen at part 2. Well, meanwhile, for Matthew Moorhart, right now, just keeping his cool and keeping it comfortable, but he's got to be mindful of the fact that James Logsdon's still there right behind him, and Shahi Zahair, the man he tussled with throughout in Spain. Well, Zahair is 1.1 seconds away from the pairing. There you can see with the rear of the picture, and he will fancy his chance of potentially taking the podium, if not at 2nd place. Coming across that timeline, 10 minutes this race complete, still 35 for the final lap to go. And remember, there will be a pit stop at some point to put some fuel in the car. We're not expecting any tyre changes, because tyres can only be done after the fuel's got into the car, and we're being approximately 7 seconds per tyre. Well, understandably, that means that you're going to spend a very long time in the pit lane if you do change even one tyre, rather than just putting the fuel in the car. You lose out, and you won't really be able to make up that lost time, because the tyres of these GTEs, the tyre model now has moved to a position where it offers similar grip compared to the original tyre model that we did see. However, the difference is now these tyres can last up to the best part of 3 to 4 hours in terms of being run continuously for multiple stints. And on top of that as well, when you start to overheat these tyres, they are more recoverable in terms of you can bring them back down to their appropriate temperature, whereas the original tyre model saw once you overheated these tyres, it took you several laps to be able to get their temperatures down to a degree. They no longer retain the heat as easily, so it means you can push a little bit more, but also if you're smart with the way you look after your tyres, you can really drive these tyres and triple stint them, as teams used to do in real life for, say, Le Mans, for example. But as Matthew Moorhart continues to hold on to 2nd place, the battle for the lead has definitely walked away right now. There's Ryan Otis, and then we do come back to the man for 2nd and 3rd. Morhart versus Logsdon, and Shahi's hair falling a little bit further away now, and in fact Julian Jones is starting to close on him a little bit. So Jones picking up the pace here. I think something has clicked to the Ford GT driver, because that last lap was a personal best of 39.98, and that was 4 tenths faster than what Shahi's hair been able to achieve on a 40.37. But as we do see him make his way towards the end of this current lap, well, we're going to take a quick trip back in time, ladies and gentlemen, and see some of the big moments from the start of the race, including, of course, how the race got underway. So as we did go green flag racing, it was a good start for Ryan Otis in particular. He'd started on pole, and Eric the guy looked to try and get the drop of it in towards turn number 1. But as they went as late as possible and went under the gantry, we can see the guy starting that outside. It was always going to be a challenge to try and make a move around the outside of Tamburello, and it was more the pressure from Shahi Zahair, who tried to force his way around the outside of Matthew Morhart. But Morhart in the end given the racing room to breathe, and as they went too wide all the way through the chicane, when the Morhart was able to get ahead, with James Logsdon squeezed his way through. Whilst Logsdon had struggled a little bit qualified to match Shahi Zahair's time, he was not going to struggle to be able to make that move for full place straight away. So he took that, as meanwhile Tom Bryce managed to get a good start versus Glenn Bratton. But wind forward a lap to lap number 2, and Tamburello had something in the cards for our drivers, particularly for Taylor Bookout. As he lost the rear coming through turn number 3, took the curve too high, the car started to snap loose, and then took a lot of curve at turn number 4, and it all went wide. As Tom Bryce, well, he met a very similar fate there, also going sideways. This is what it looked like for Tom Bryce when he did get it wrong, and well, this was an alternative camera angle. And Bryce taking a huge amount of the sausage curve there at turn number 3 as he made his way to turn number 4, hit the sausage curve with the front left tyre, doing what Taylor Bookout did, and in the end up in the gravel trap. But then after that, we did have this on lap number 6 for Eric Leguy, making his way in towards Aqua Minerale as he came on down through the sweeping bends. Well, you can see there the AO Racing Tribute livery machine winning with a bit too much speed. Oh my goodness, and that was a near miss there. James Logsdon almost going into the wayward cart of Eric Leguy, missing out, I would say, by millimetres there. And well, thankfully, James Logsdon just about dodging that, and Matthew Morhart being given a bit of a reprieve in that second place, in the end being able to hold on to it. And this is what it looked like from Matthew Morhart's perspective. As they came through, he was at the time behind. Logsdon had to actually put the brakes on there. He did have to briefly lock up the front brakes, and Matthew Morhart was able to essentially steal the place away as he powered his way on past into the braking zone for the auto chicane. So Matthew Morhart seizing on the opportunity and moving in to 6th place. That extends the story so far as we go back, ladies and gentlemen, to your live racing. And as we do come back, still plenty of time in the car, still 31 minutes plus a final lap, and therefore more is still to happen. But as we do see the fighting calm down for a little bit, what we do note is that Julian Jones still chased after Shahi's hair and still bringing that gap down little by little. There's been no other changes since then. Matthew Morhart has opened up a bit of a gap to James Logsdon. That gap up to 7 tenths of a second currently. Looking a bit safe, however, Logsdon still watching on here, and I suspect Logsdon may be going into tyre and fuel management mode now, and this could be the same that can be said for all of these drivers. Ryan Otis, of course, the anomaly, who has been setting 39 zeros and 39 ones over the last couple of laps. This man right now really stretching his legs here and deciding, right, it's time to get the hammer down. The car's all warmed up. There's no pressure from behind, so only pressure is the pressure I make for myself. And no wonder the number 3 driver right now is absolutely flying out there. He took that pole position, of course, by almost a whole second. And right now, he's doing his best to open up the lead by the best part of 6 to 7 tenths a lap. And that is entirely impressive as he comes towards the timeline this time. What's he going to be? It's a 39.653. So not as good as his previous laps, but to be fair, when you consider that Matthew Morhart crossed line, a 39.678, a personal best. Well, just about matches Ryan Otis, but if that's the personal best from him to match Otis, then it does really show you that Otis right now has all the cards when it comes to pace. But we will see what the way it's going to go as James Logsdon follows on here still, and Logsdon right now definitely shadowing Morhart as much as possible as Shahi's hair started to fall away a little bit from the top 3, and Julian Jones that time around was matched by Zahair. He was not beaten by him, and we're understanding both drivers now I think responding to each other. Taylor Bookout 12 seconds behind, not quite on the pace on those in front, but definitely clear of the pace of those behind him. As you do see Glenn Bratton there, and Glenn Bratton right now carrying on his journey down towards Tamburello, and then we're down towards Villeneuve, I should say, from Tamburello, and Eric Leguy just coming into the scene of your view there very quickly. And as he does so, the number 6 driver trying to make up for lost time. Now, in terms of his pace, he has got the pace to catch Bratton and Bookout. Julian Jones, he is lapping about half a second quicker than at the moment, and about the same for Shahi Zahair. So the point being, Now, at this rate, he may be able to catch up to 4th place by the end of the race, but he's going to need something to go wrong for the top 3 because they are matching, if not outpacing him at the moment. And Eric Lagai, of course, with that slight mistake coming out to Aquamarali, big consequences, and those consequences being forced him all the way down the field. As Tom Bryce, meanwhile, still lapping quicker than Glenn Bratton. That gap to Bratton now down to 7.2 seconds. And he'll just gradually chisel away at it here. It won't be paying off right now. It will pay off towards the very end of the race. But I suspect we are going to see a classic battle between the two privateers. But we come back to your leader. And Ryan Otis right now still in control. A 39.04 was his fastest lap, but 39.6 was his previous lap. Matthew Morhart, meanwhile, well, James Logsdon took 2 tenths out of him on that lap. A personal best behind for Shahi Zahair. Julian Jones almost matching it. And Jones, in fact, closed on Zahair just a little bit more. There you can see with the rear of the picture. So a battle is never too far away as we do jump aboard with James Logsdon. Now coming out of turn number 6 here at this point, well, are we into the pit window? The answer is yes, we are theoretically. However, do keep in mind that with these GTE machines, like with most cars on the simulator and in real life, the longer you can stay out there, the better, because you are driving on a lighter car. You don't want to put the fuel in until you absolutely have to. The lighter the car, the quicker it theoretically is. And when the tyre's not being changed around, what it means is you lose a little bit of tyre temperature in the pit lane. You lose about what will be approximately 13 degrees Fahrenheit of temperature out of the tyre, at least the edges of the tyre. The core cool down a little bit more by comparison. And you have to warm the tyre up. You have to take it through another thermal cycle. Now, if you do it right, the tyre will very quickly switch back on. By the end of your outlap, you should be back up to the pace you were on before you came into the pit. Of course, without the consideration of the extra fuel you have now put in the car to make the car heavier. But if you get it wrong and you push the tyre too aggressively on the outlap, if you interrupt the thermal cycle or exceed it, you end up with a quite warm tyre. Essentially, you take it through multiple thermal cycles very quickly, and it will hurt the life of the tyre in the long term and ruin the grip levels of it. As both drivers come into the pit lane early here, and well, Logsdon getting very close there. That's a surprise. I did not think they'd be coming in this early, but both deciding to gamble here with going for the undercut strategy. And I think it was Matthew Morhart decided to come in. I think James Logsdon take the approach of whatever Morhart does, I'm going to do the same. But definitely we are in the pit window. They've just proven the point. Shahi Zahair and Julian Jones carrying on, but Jones is closing little by little. And well, where will Morhart and Logsdon come back out as Taylor Bookout goes past them? Then Bratton comes on through as well, and already Morhart has been serviced, so has Logsdon. And well, Morhart having the shorter pit stop by 1.5 seconds. I believe they are going to come out here and they will be around Tom Bryce, who makes his way through the picture. But in the end, Bryce will be ahead of the pair of them, so you won't have to worry about going too wide in towards Tamburello. What it means is that for Matthew Morhart, he's reopened that gap to Logsdon up to 1.8 seconds, given the fact he had the faster pit stop by 1.5 seconds. Now, James Logsdon's got all the work to do to try and close him down. That's definitely going to be a bit of a tall ask here, given the time and how rapid the pace is. But to be fair, if he can do it, he will then have to try and find a way to overtake him. That's not going to be easy whatsoever, given the fact, as we've seen so far, Morhart and Logsdon seem to be the equal each other, albeit then there's the question of can you get close enough to make a move. We're back to Shahi Zahair, and well, right now he's had a better lap this time compared to the previous one. Last lap he was caught up to by the best part of 4 tenths. You know, Julian Jones on this lap, I don't know where it's gone wrong for Jones. We're just trying to understand where his sectors have not been as good. It is the middle sector, Aquamarali. Julian Jones has not had a good run. I wonder if he's succumbed to a bit of oversteer going in towards Aquamarali. And well, as a result, he has now actually dropped to 1.6 seconds behind as he makes his way out to about to 2. But will he come into the pits? No, he will not. Neither driver does here. They carry on. And well, could we see them potentially get the jump on Matthew Morhart and James Logsdon? Because remember the fact, they're out there right now. They don't have to switch their tyres back on. And they may just be able to close the effective gap a bit later on in the race. Eric Lagai onto the back of Glenn Bratton now, getting ready to go on the attack as Taylor Bookout is into the pit lane, and both of them go into the pits as well, although Lagai gets way too close to the back of Bratton's car, and in the end gets a good view of what's on the back of it, and Glenn Bratton being a bit more conservative about coming into the pit lane. To be fair, there's no rule that says you cannot brake too early for the pit lane, although you should brake sensibly for it, but the point being, so long as you come into the pits on the limiter, or you obey the pit entry speed, anything else really does go, and I don't think Bratton there was trying to brake test Eric Lagai. I think he's just trying to make it safely into the pit lane. So the last thing you want is a speeding penalty for the pit lane, because if you do, you then pick up a drive-through penalty. It means you have to make a visit, with the pit lane at Imola being one of the longest on our calendar. Indeed, it can rival the circuit of Barcelona Catalunya and goes a little bit further than it. Understandably, you do not want to have to make a trip through the pit lane on the pit limiter, because I believe the speed you carry down the pit lane is somewhere in the region of 48 miles an hour on the limiter. And well, 48 miles an hour compared to a straight where you're pushing upwards of 160 miles an hour at the end of it, you do the quick mathematics, and what you'll find is you are spending an exceptionally long time in the pit lane. Nobody likes that, I can assure you. But as Tom Bryce makes his way all around, right now leading in the prime class, taking back that lead with Glenn Bratton making his pit stop early. Well, let's wait and see where these drivers come in and when they do. Matthew Morhart on the back of Bryce. Now, if I was Bryce, I'd be thinking about coming in at the end of this lap, because I wouldn't want to have to deal with the pros trying to overtake me. Keep in mind, of course, I'm now in a different race compared to the pros behind me. Well, they have pitted, so they are one pit stop ahead. There is no value in me fighting with them, and that's what Bryce has got to think about here. And the more he fights with them, the more time he'll then cost himself in trying to chase down Glenn Bratton, who we know he does have around a 3 to 4 tenths of a second a lap advantage on average based on qualifying, and is opening 12 laps of this race after correcting his error. But Bryce is going to carry on here, so interesting. He's deciding that by going on, he might be able to keep going quicker. I think the thought process will be that he's going to let the places go to Morhart and eventually Logsdon at a time that's so convenient. And we're heading towards Tamburello here. He's going to body lift and coast his way into the corner, although does actually fight it around the outside a little bit there. Not literally fighting in the sense of trying to battle for the position, but in the sense of essentially being caught on the outside. And well, here comes James Logsdon immediately, and Logsdon is not going to mince his words on this one. He'll dive up the inside there in towards Villeneuve. Well, Bryce will lose both of those places overall, loses a little bit of time to the likes of Glenn Bratton, understandably, given the fact he was on a compromised line in towards Tamburello. But in all, that's probably going to cost him only about 2 to 3 tenths, and the return will be that he can do a bit of fuel saving here if he stays with Logsdon Morhart for at least a lap, if not a couple of laps. He can get that distant tow, which will help him going around the lap, save the fuel, and have a shorter effective pit stop. So he may get the time back that he lost through what happened at Tamburello by just simply staying in touch. But meanwhile, Glenn Bratton behind Taylor Bookout, and we believe the Bookout's had a bit of an error somewhere, because suddenly he's lost out. Hold up a second. Tom Bryce has made his way back ahead of James Logsdon. Logsdon's got it wrong at Minerale, where it went wrong for Eric Lagai there earlier on, and now Logsdon has succumbed to turns 9 and 10 as well. And that's not a happy moment there for your number 42 driver. And once the Team Bear Pope machine gets his head down, right now he's got even more work to do, as Matthew Morhart will now be 6.4 seconds ahead of him. That is a big gap and not an easy one to close down. As he comes down the hill, well, meanwhile, Ryan Otis staying out there. And your number 3 driver at this point, just looking to be continuously in control. The gap to Shahi Zahair, 11.5 seconds. Here is Zahair, who still has Julian Jones trying to chase him. And Jones's pace is on average slightly quicker, normally touching around 1 to 2 tenths based on the lap time progression so far. The only problem is when Jones starts to get within a second of Zahair, the dirty air seems to offset his aerodynamic coefficient, and what it does is actually upsets the car a little bit more. Now, one of the things that this Ford GTE is very powerful at is its aerodynamics. It arguably is the most aerodynamic of the GTEs that we do have out there racing today, but the downside is, because it is very reliant on its aerodynamic grip, it means when you do go into the draft of another car, unless you're ready to essentially deal with that dirty air, you're going to find that suddenly the Ford GT changes the way it behaves. He clatters the curb there at turn number 13. That's not the way, turn number 12. That's not the way you want to do it. And indeed, essentially rubbing the front splitter off of the curb. That splitter will hold together for now, but understandably, he keeps doing it. He's at risk of damaging it later on in the race, and even damaging the front suspension if he hits the curbing too high. Let's see what he can do as he continues the chase. But meanwhile, we make our way briefly back in time and take a look back at what happened only moments ago to both Taylor Bookout and also to James Logsdon. And we begin with the story of Taylor Bookout making an error. So this was Bookout at the time, followed by Eric Lagai, making the way down in towards Ravazza 1. Onto the brakes he went, and in the end, went a bit too deep, locked up the front right brake in particular, and Eric Lagai just simply tucked up the inside, and we're losing out there to Taylor Bookout, as in the end had to gradually bring himself back onto the road with Glenn Bratton just behind. But then, drama for James Logsdon. And this was Logsdon at the time, chasing after Matthew Morehart with Tom Bryce behind. And in the end, he made his way through turn 9, hit the curb too high, unsettled the car. As he tried to get it settled on the brakes to turn number 10, the car said no, and the rear completely let go. So the 42 driver in the end get himself back on the road, but not the way he wanted it to go whatsoever. Unfortunate for James Logsdon, but still more work to be done, and he will definitely get a move on for it as we return to your live racing. As we do come on back, well, we still do have a few pit stops to come, and we haven't quite seen them come about as of yet. And those pit stops are for Ryan Otis, Shahi Zahair, Julian Jones, and also Tom Bryce. So it is first, second, third, and fifth right now who need to pit. Otherwise, everybody else has taken their mandatory pit stop. And we see Tom Bryce right now still leading the Pro-Am class, and the lap times he's been pumping out have been some very impressive laps thus far. And compared to Glenn Bratton, he's continued the theme of lapping at about 4/10 of a second faster a lap. So the theory would be that Bryce right now, if he was coming to the pits with 15 minutes to go, he would be around 2 seconds. If the pit stops were absolutely equal, he'd be about 2 seconds off the back of Glenn Bratton, we're predicting. Let's wait and see if that's the way it does play out in reality. Ryan Otis, meanwhile, in control, 13 seconds ahead of Shahi Zahair. The main danger man for him will be Matthew Morehart. But again, the fact the lap times right now for Ryan Otis are still very comfortably in the low 39s, the 39.1 through to 39.3s on average. And meanwhile, for Matthew Morehart, it's in the mid to low 40s at the moment. And these last up of 40.47, I think we can be assured that Ryan Otis right now is going to be able to come out of the pit lane with some spare change in terms of time. Shahi Zahair carries on. Well, the BMW M8 driver doing a very solid job here, and Julian Jones still trying to give the chase as we jump on board with your number 69 Ford GT. They're making this way up the hill towards Piratella. And this time, well, for Jones, the lap time's been equalised by Zahair. There's very little between them now as we get closer and closer towards the end of their opening stint. The last time around, it was Zahair who had the advantage by half a tenth. Jones may have it this time, but of course, that gap between the two just oscillating back and forth. It's staying at around 1.3 to 1.5 seconds, and that's why our battle box, as quickly as it appeared, it quickly disappeared, because we normally do it based on 1.5 seconds between the two cars. It keeps oscillating back and forth. But Julian Jones definitely trying to put all the effort in, but right now I just think he's hitting the limit of what he can get out of the Ford GT here today. Indeed, with the fixed setup, it's not going to be easy, because you're really having to dial yourself in to a setup on the car and get the most out of it for the circuit. Although that's not to blame the setup, to be fair. That cannot be used as the excuse. Everyone is on a fixed setup. Everyone has to deal with what their cards they're given, and they all come into the pit lane. So these will be the final pit stops of the day, or at least the scheduled ones, we should say that. Ryan Otis already parked up, fuel going in the car. Now Shahi's here and Julian Jones now. It's going to be a race between them to see who gets the fuel in the car first and who's able to get out. And has Jones done anything special to try and close the gap on fuel strategy? Well, Matthew Morehart makes his way down towards Ravazza. Ryan Otis leaves the pit lane gradually, and as he does so, there he is. You can see him just over the pit wall, and well, he'll return to a very comfortable lead of this race. But meanwhile, where is Shahi Zahair? Where's Julian Jones? Well, there's Zahair, making his way down. Jones is behind him. Jones has closed up a little bit as a result of the pit stop. Where's Matthew Morehart? There he is. Matthew Morehart, in fact, by going for the undercut, he has gained a little bit on both of them. But as we come out the pit lane, Julian Jones is the one who's gained the most of Zahair. He's actually gained approximately 0.6 of a second in the pit stop. He had saved a little bit more fuel. He spent half a second less time stationary and end-to-end in the pit lane. It was about a similar stop. In fact, it was about a similar margin in the end, so it was all made up in the stationary time. And Julian Jones now into fourth place, with James Logsdon, of course, having that error earlier on. That's put him down to fifth. And now he's got a 10.5 second gap to close down versus Julian Jones if he wants to chase after fourth. And then he'll go after Zahair for the podium. But as Bryce makes his way out to the pit lane, there he is. Where is Glenn Bratton? And Glenn Bratton's a lot further back. Now, we've got to imagine that Glenn Bratton's had an off-track somewhere, and I think that's contributed to Bratton being a lot further behind where he should be. We thought Bratton would be out ahead, but a mistake has occurred for Glenn Bratton, and it's definitely cost him. What is the mistake, I hear you ask? Well, the good news is we've got a replay to explain, and here we go for a brief trip back in time. So this was Glenn Barrett, and it was a spin there. Now, where was that? I think that was at Ravazza 1. It's gone around. He's tried to get the car turned around. Can we see a different camera angle? Yes, we can. That's Ravazza 1 there. Going down the hill. The rear of the car's let go, and he's then had to spend the best part of around about 10 seconds getting it turned around for Ravazza 2. And that explains the swap there. Otherwise, the gap would have been around 2 seconds as we thought, but unfortunately, it swung the other way as a result of Bratton's mistake. And you got to feel for Glenn because he was looking so good, and he's got it all wrong here today as we return to your live racing. As we do come back, well, for Glenn Bratton, he's still got to make sure he keeps on pushing. He can't give up hope. You never know what can happen, to be fair, until the very end. But the gaps are now spread out a little bit, and therefore, for all the drivers, this is now going to be a race of attrition. And so who makes the first mistake, if any mistakes are made, and who can gradually chisel away at the gap to their closest rival. Now, with Matthew Morhart, 11.7 seconds behind Ryan Otis. There is Morhart making his way through turns 5 and 6. As he heads in towards Tosa Hairpin at turn number 7. Well, right now, looking very safe there versus Shahi Zahair, who's 3.2 seconds behind. And Zahair doesn't really have a response at this time. And the average lap delta between Morhart and Zahair being about 2.5 tenths on average. Julian Jones, after getting within a second, well, as quickly as he got within a second, that gap has reopened to 1.8 seconds between the two of them. And something tells me that is most likely where Julian Jones, again, confronted with the wall of dirty air off the back of the BMW M8. That Walsh is just not helping the front end of his Ford GT, and he's just having to sit in the dirty air, and he's not able to get any closer. So he really needs Zahair to make a mistake at this point. Otherwise, I think his race progress now is really going to be stymied, and, well, there's not going to be much more in it for him. But coming through the auto chicane, all he can do at this point is just keep the consistency. It is going to be a bit of a brutal test here. And the thing is, when you can't get that much closer, you've just got to be the constant threat in the background. And perhaps that will be enough to distract your rival. Tom Bryce, well, leader now of the Pro-Am class. In fact, hold the phone on that, ladies and gents, because we've had a further incident, and that is for James Logsdon at the auto chicane. So Logsdon getting it wrong at the chicane, gets himself righted very quickly. We'll get a replay of that in due course. With the Team Bearpoke driver, it's going from good to bad to worse now, as mistakes are starting to build up a little bit. And with mistakes, of course, the loss of control comes instant points. And just to put you in perspective, well, he pretty much confirms what we were thinking. Was he going to be dangerously close to a drive-through penalty? And the answer is he has a drive-through penalty. He has exceeded the 10 instant point limit. And as he makes one down, Eric Lagai will take a place back. Not the way he wanted to get it, but he'll still be happy he's recovered one place at least. And Logsdon is already halfway down the pit lane now, but that's taken quite some time, and will end to end this pit lane definitely has a bit of a bother on the pit limiter, and it does cost you the best part of around about 50 seconds, because you've got to consider the slowdown time on entry and also the speed up time on the exit. In fact, now we say 50 seconds, make it more 36 seconds end to end of the pit lane. You spend the best part of 28 seconds going from one end to the other, but then of course you lose speed on entry. That's about 2 seconds, and then you do have to build up the speed heading down towards what will be the Tamburello chicane. So at least 30 seconds at that, and Logsdon now has got Taylor Bookout right behind him. So Bookout catching up, the two Team Bearpoke cars together. Well, Logsdon has proven to be the faster driver based on qualifying and the race pace thus far. Both have had their own errors, so I would imagine that Logsdon will gradually move away very shortly, and Bookout will be made to follow him, but this will help both of them. They'll have a bit of company, and they might be able to work together a little bit just to gain some time, particularly for Bookout, and just keep it safe from Tom Bryce, who's trying to chase him down. And speaking of Tom Bryce, in fact, he is gaining quite rapidly on Bookout, but that's because Bookout did make a mistake a couple of laps ago. And still seems to be recovering from his error. And Bryce Rat on the leading Pro-Am driver wanted to try and take on one of the pros here today if he can. But as we do look back up to Matthew Morhart, second place runner. He's definitely opened that gap up to Shahi Zahair. That last time around, he gained another 300ths on Zahair. Small margins, but in the gap's up to 3.3 seconds. He'll be definitely feeling more safe than sorry now. And the way he's managing this race is definitely with aplomb. Here's Shahi Zahair. Coming down towards the next chicane. His full process is going to be, okay, we've got the gap. Can we make sure that we don't make any mistakes now all the way to the end? Because Julian Jones, we pushed quite hard on the previous lap, made a bit of an error. And, well, Julian Jones now in fourth place, but he is almost 4 seconds off the back of Zahair. And I think that is going to stay as it is for now, unless Zahair makes a mistake of his own. Julian Jones, I think he's pushing so hard at the moment, he's finding the more he pushes, the worse things are getting. And sometimes you've just got to avoid pushing, drive smart, drive sensible, and that can be just as valuable as trying to grind out an extra tenth of lap time, which isn't just going to come forth without a lot of hard work. But meanwhile, Tom Bryce, your prime leader, We're still trying to stay with Bookout, and in fact, the gap between the two of them, Bryce does bring it down by another almost 3/10 of a second at last time around. 10 minutes to go, lap times being in the region of 1 3/4 minutes. We do some quick mathematics. Our leader's about to go on to lap 22. I don't think anyone's going to get lapped today, so everyone will be on the lead lap. We go on to lap 22 now. I suspect we've got around about another 6 to 7 laps left for our leader. In fact, I want to say 6 laps, and therefore that will mean that we will be going to lap 27. And well, for Tom Bryce, there is just enough time for him to try and close that gap down to Bookout, but he'll have to keep working at it as he comes out at Aquinarale. In fact, that was a poor run for the chicane, and that's going to enable Bookout to pull away from him. In fact, the gap opens up now to 4.2 seconds. Logsdon starts to bolt away from his teammate, which is what we expected. So Logs now open up a bit of a gap. And he'll feel a bit safer now at the risk of losing some valuable points. And well, we just had confirmation from race control that we are expecting 27 laps based on the current pace of Ryan Otis. So therefore, it's still a better time in this one. I do wonder whether everyone is ready for a 27th lap. Ryan Otis at least should just about squeeze that lap in. That may catch a few drivers by surprise. But then again, when the race leader has a quite comfortable pace advantage, well, that does mean when they're out at the race front of the field, they can suddenly deliver those extra laps that others would not have expected or perhaps practiced for. Ryan Otis right now absolutely smooth as butter as he makes his way around the circuit. Of course, the Porsche does have the advantage of being the king of low-speed corners, so chicane-based circuits, particularly ones with low-speed chicanes, such as the Imola circuit with Alta, for example, and also Aquinarale. When you do go through turn 10 through the kinks, that's where the Porsche is going to work out very well. It has a knack for low-speed traction compared to other cars, which is why it's absolutely loved at hairpin-filled circuits and why it's always a car to go to at the likes of Daytona International Speedway, for example. Although next time out at Silverstone, it could be a very different story because Silverstone is all about medium and high-speed corners, or in other words, it is going to be to some extent Ford GT territory, and every other car is going to try and play catch-up there. So that will be an interesting challenge for our drivers to conquer. But coming back to Matthew Morhart, and making his way down the start for this straight. You can see in the rear of the picture, Sharky's ahead, just a bit further behind. And will the BMW driver setting a personal best? It was still 1.2 tenths slower than Morhart's time, but Julian Jones right now with his last lap being 2.3 seconds slower by comparison. The Ford GT driver at this point, I think, has turned the wick down and now is just focusing on trying to get to the end. We're an 18-second gap over Eric Lagai. Lagai may be closing down at 1 second a lap, but that's going to make no difference with the laps we've got remaining, and Julian Jones having to settle for fourth place. But we're not going to settle for not finding out what happened to James Logsdon only months ago, and also for Taylor Bookout. We start off with a small off-track for the second of the Bear Poke drivers. So this was Bookout making his way up towards Tamburello, went onto the brakes, and as he did so, went a little bit wide. The car jinked one way, then the other. Oh my goodness, and bouncing over the curbs there, and well, particularly the sausage curb at turn number 3, and in the end, Pogo in the round, and that's the last thing you want, and I'm amazed that car is still going, to be fair. I suspect that suspension is a bit damaged. You can see, actually, he wobbled the steering wheel around a little bit just to see where it's still turning, because it can break the steering on these cars, even on the simulator. Then we had this for James Logsdon. And this was Logsdon this time at the Alta chicane. He got caught out at Aquinarale a few laps before. And here came with all the speed, hit the first curb okay. And in the end, tried to transition it for the second corner. And the car just simply said no. I think he went a bit too high on the turn at 12 curb. And as a result, they put the car up into two wheels. By the time it came down, he went to turn left. The car was still wanting to go right. But with that, he's got it righted. And therefore, it's back to your live racing. So some big mistakes there for the Bear Poke team, but still, make no mistake, there's still a bit of time for them to make up some places. And well, as we do look back to your racing, 6 minutes left on the clock. We're on to lap number 24 for our overall leader, and drivers very gradually making them on to lap 24. And well, for Tom Bryce, the prime leader, right now managing his advantage, 3 attempts a lap, he's still being able to gain on Glenn Bratton. And well, this is all falling into the hands of your 272 driver right now as he roars away off into the distance and comes down towards Ravazza. And for Bryce, this will be, should it end up this way, a third win of the season in the Pro-Am class. And right now, really building that momentum with back-to-back victories. He'll be pleased with that. Glenn Bratton, meanwhile, well, he'll be thinking to himself, if it were not for that spin at Ravazza 1, this could have been a very close run for the win in the Pro-Am class, because he would have been ahead after the pit stops, but understandably, he would then been in the position he'd need to have fought for the remaining, what would have been 17 minutes of racing. It has been very interesting today how we've seen a lot of drivers and go for the major splitting strategy. Where at the Circuit of Barcelona Catalunya, it was primarily go as long as you possibly could. Here today, we have seen some big names right at the front of the field opt to pit on lap number 11, including Matthew Morhart and also James Logsdon. Lap 12 for Taylor Buckout and Glenn Bratton, and then the rest of the field pit on lap 17. So quite the spread. The theme of go as long as possible for the lightest possible car in both stints, not always applying, but I suspect it's also the worry about track position at Imola being so vital to success, and that's the thought that number of drivers have had. If they could find some clear space when they pitted, they would go for it early, late, it didn't matter when. But as Bratton makes one around in the BMW, well, coming up towards what will be Piratella corner shortly. And in terms of those gaps right now, are any of them narrowing? Well, James Logsdon, we've still got to try and close down the best part of 14 seconds to Eric Lagai. He is faster by a couple of attempts a lap. Right now, at least for Logsdon, that's going to be too big of a bridge to jump, as he really will be in a situation whereby, unless Eric Lagai makes the mother of all errors, he's definitely going to need quite a few more laps, and he's not got those available, as those front brake discs are red hot. That just goes to show you how hard those brakes are being worked. Of course, that is normal. Don't be worried about the fact they're glowing. That's how much heat goes through them. Once the brake temperatures do push upwards of what is, I do know in centigrade, but not in Fahrenheit, you're looking at around about 500 degrees centigrade, I want to say, on the carbon ceramic brake disc. And that's when you are starting to see the front brakes overheat very much so. But up until that point, they are relatively okay. You can really abuse these brakes, but that's what carbon ceramic's all about. The idea is they do withstand the test of repetitive braking, which is why if you ever do go buy a road car, of which all these GTEs, excluding or a bit of a questionable statement regarding the Ford GT, because many would say it's not based on the road car. If anything, it became a road car in a very limited production run, and a waiver had to be made for this car. Well, the thing that will equip with carbon ceramic brakes, the road cars they're based on, they will normally have the option of fitting carbon ceramic brakes to the car, which you as a daily driver, you wouldn't really want to use carbon ceramic brakes for just doing daily driving to your local place of business or for leisurely commutes. Although you can use them, they are more made for track day work, particularly if you want the brakes to last more than, say, 15 to 20 minutes. Whereas normal brakes, they will do it, but remember, normal brakes will be more steel brakes, if you will. They normally overheat quite quickly, and they lose or have a significant drop-off in braking performance. And you get what is the phenomenon of thermal locking of the brakes, not where they'll seize completely, but you'll suddenly find when you stamp on the brake pedal, the car wants to travel a lot deeper into a braking zone than normal. And if you're wondering why I know that, well, trust me, ladies and gentlemen, myself in the opening corner, Brands Hatch and Hyundai i30, didn't quite end up in the gravel trap, but I almost ended up there. But that's a story for another time, which I'm very happy to talk about in the Middle of the Pack Racing League Discord. We'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end of today's broadcast. And if you want a bit more intrigue as well, my mother was in the car at that time as a passenger rider. Well, it was definitely a very funny moment. But still, we'll leave that there. You can definitely catch up with the lore behind the commentary booth in the Middle of the Pack Racing League Discord if you so desire. But still, as Julian Jones makes his way up the hill right now. No threat of the brakes giving way on these cars at the moment. And indeed, he's looking very good in that Ford GT, albeit 2 minutes left to go. And Ryan Otis right now making his way down the hill. And right now, does seem to be in control. He's looking very much on course to become the first repeat winner of the Pro and overall category. And all he's got between himself and that accolade is one more lap of the Imola circuit. The 45 minutes has absolutely flown us by, and with a minute and a half to go, here he goes then onto lap number 27. For Ryan Otis, it's one lap and a dream of a second win of the season. All he's got to do is keep it together, as meanwhile, oh, what's happened here? And that is, I think, Aqua Minerale. Eric, the guy's been caught out again. He got caught out early on the race. The car went round, and it is the same error almost much later in the race. So he's had it at the start, he's had it at the end. Well, you normally like to bookend your race with something positive. That is not positive, that's negative. Well, either way, he's found the bookends for both for it, and here's a quick replay to explain what exactly went wrong for Eric Lagai. And as he made his way down the hill, coming into us turns 9 and 10. Turn 9 took it absolutely perfectly. Turn 10 went fine, but on the brakes there, the rear of the car just let go. I wonder if he carried too much speed then, didn't get the braking quite right. It's not easy to do, to be fair, in these GTs, because you are the ABS. You modulate the brake yourself. You have no ABS to look after you if you don't put the brakes on correctly. And I think Eric, the guy, carried too much speed, and as he downshifted, the car spun up on the rear tyres. But still, back to your live racing, ladies and gentlemen. And as we do come back, we come back in good time as Eric Laguy has a drive-through penalty for that extra set of instant points he would have picked up for the loss of control. So he will lose out to James Logsdon and Taylor Bookout, and he will drop all the way to 7th place in the pro category. Will he lose the 8th? Will he lose 7th place overall to Tom Bryce? Not quite so. Or will he? Yes, he will. Bryce will dive up the inside there, and Bryce right now has an opportunity to pick up a couple more points before this is all said and done. So expect a fight between them. But meanwhile, as they make the way onto their final lap, we look back to this man. And for Ryan Otis, what a drive it's been today. Taking pole position by 9/10 of a second, and in the end, running away to victory overall. He becomes the first repeat winner overall in this season, and he takes that win in the end by 15 seconds over Matthew Morhart. Speaking of which, here comes Morhart. And it's wound down, and it's not quite his second win of the season, but it is going to be another podium for the priority in the number 10, and a well-earned one at that. 6 seconds ahead of Shahi Zaher in the BMW M8, and earning himself a spot on the podium there in a car that wasn't the pace of the Porsches, but my goodness, was he consistent enough and made sure not to make any mistakes. Julian Jones chased down Shahi Zaher as much as possible today, but the Ford GT just didn't have the pace through the corners, and in the end, the number 69 Dry Hands settled for 4th place, but definitely a frustrating day of action for him. And then we will see James Logsdon shortly coming on through. But what about the battle for 7th place? Eric Laguy still defending here versus Eric Laguy still attacking, I should say, versus Tom Bryce. They get them in the right order, and Bryce right now trying to hold on as much as possible. And once they come down the hill in towards Ratsa 1, Bryce just needs to hold on for a little bit longer. But will there be a move from Laguy? And the break, and the answer is going to be no. As meanwhile, James Logsdon will take home that 5th place for Team Bear Pope, and the change from day for him today, no doubt about it. Taylor Bookout will come home just behind his teammate in 6th. And then we will see Tom Bryce head towards the line, but will he hold on? Eric Laguy has got the draft here, but will he be able to make the move to the line? The answer is going to be no, and Tom Bryce will take the prime win. Also, we're at 7th place. Eric Laguy will take 8th, and it will be the runner-up spot in the prime class for the second of our 2 prime drivers here today, of Glenn Bratton. And in the end, the privateer, when he was in control, he had it all fall out of his hands with a mistake at Ravazza 1, and with Glenn Bratton, it was in 9th place. But well done to them all, and great to see all drivers make it to the finish line on the lead lap. And what a race we've had here today. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, as the drivers do cool and calm them down, well, let's take a look to the scenic view and with it to the race results, subject to any stewards' inquiries. And as we can see, after an absolutely entertaining 45 minutes of racing action for round number 6 of the Middle of the Pack Racing League GTE League for 2026, brought to you on iRacing for the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari today, also known as the Imola circuit, Ryan Otis proves himself to be the absolute king of Imola, it would seem, by 15 seconds over Matthew Morhart, who in the end could not find a way to touch the pace of the race leader. But behind the 2 Americans, the podium was completed by the Sri Lankan of Shahi Zaher in his BMW M8, who in the end drove a very consistent race and made sure to pick up the places that were lost to James Logsdon, but also make sure that Julian Jones couldn't quite get close enough to be able to threat at him. Speaking of which, Jones finished in 4th place there in the Ford GT, had the pace it would seem through some of the sweepers, but not through the chicanes, kept Shahi Zaher honest until the very end, and then had to back off the pace. James Logsdon, with a couple of critical errors for Team Bearpo, in the end fell to 5th, with a drive-through penalty being added on to his errors. And we also got to see Taylor Bookout, his teammate, just behind by 6 seconds after an early spin, really costing a chance to finish inside the top 5. Tom Bryce took the prime win in 7th place there, the priority, after a spin for him on the opening laps, but in the end was able to get it back together, and in doing so earned himself the prime win after it was a spin for Glenn Bratton, a much more severe one, some would say, and Tom Bryce there making it now a 3rd prime win of the season. Eric Laguy took 8th place, and he just missed out there with that drive-through penalty right towards the very end after his second mistake at Minerale, and we couldn't quite find his way past Bryce to the finish line, and Glenn Bratton completing that finishing order in 9th place there. Well done the priority to get into the end, and all of our drivers finishing on the lead lap, which is absolutely brilliant to see. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our rundown of the race results, subject to any stewards' inquiries, but I do believe all those stewards' inquiries have been completed, and in fact, I'm hearing in my ear, we do have your results after the round in terms of how the standings now stand after 6 rounds of racing, and let's bring you up to speed with those before we do wrap up this broadcast. So without further ado, here we go. We start off with the Drivers' Championship standings. Overall, after what is 6 rounds of racing, and as we can see, James Logsdon holding his lead at 18 points as Shahi Zaher now moves into 2nd, and in 3rd, Ryan Otis. But Ryan Otis bringing home that second win, becoming the first repeat winner in the pro and overall categories. He is closing very rapidly on the top two. The next man he needs to tick off the list will be none other than Shahi Zahair. And then James Logsdon sits at the pinnacle right now. But rounds are running out, drop scores are becoming a thing. And has Ryan Otis got enough time to be able to close this one out? Taylor Bookout sits further back in fourth place on 188 points, still mathematically within reach of the top spot. However, he will need results to swing his way at Silverstone, otherwise he will be out for the count in the championship fight. Matthew Morhart completes the top 5, a further 14 points behind, and 2 ahead of Chad Henson. Not on the grid for this round, and it means it's a 0 score, and he falls to 6th place. In 7th, it's Julian Jones, just ahead of Matt Best, by only the best part of 8 points. And then we do see a further 2 points behind Eric Lagai and also Jermaine Warren completing the top 10. And outside the top 10, Gabriel Ferrero, Blake Phillips, Jason Landry, Edwin Offrey and David Adeyeye. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side of your screen, the Prime class, with a third win in the class for this season, Tom Bryce moves into lead ahead of Glenn Bratton still, and Donald Seepeck not on the grid today, falls to third, but Bryce opened up a bit of a gap to the tune of 9 points, and can he maintain it with 2 rounds to go? Outside the top 3, it's Mark Senna going fourth ahead of Roger Ganesh, and we do have Carl Peterson and Bill Mendocosta completing the Prime standings. Meanwhile, in the Euro Cup, what we see after 2 rounds of racing, and that's rounds 5 and 6, in the pros on the left-hand side, Ryan Otis takes the lead on 101 points, 11 ahead of James Logsdon, who today lost some major points along the way, and therefore now finds himself on the back foot. Only a point behind him is Matthew Morhart, who's building momentum, and Shahi Zahair's a third point adrift. It is only 2 points separated second, third, and fourth. That's definitely going to be a bit of a tasty battle going into Silverstone. And then we do see Taylor Bookout a further 10 points behind in 5th place. Julian Jones, Jermaine Warren, Eric Lagai, and Matt Best complete the Pro Cup standings. As for your Prime Cup, it's Tom Bryce, 3 points ahead of Glenn Bratton, and today's result, particularly passing Eric Lagai towards the end, was critical in enabling him to open up a little bit of a lead, but it's only 3 points at the moment that can always disintegrate come the end of the next race. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to know more about the middle of the pack racing league community and everything in between, we do strongly recommend you join our official Discord, invite link available on screen. You won't find a more welcoming sim racing community, and whether you're a casual driver all the way through to an esports professional, we'd be more than happy to have you join the middle of the pack racing league community. Alternatively, if you're a little bit socially shy and perhaps you're more of a social media person, we're always welcome to follow us on Twitter, also known as X, and that's at twitter.com/MOP Racing, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and announcements and all things middle of the pack racing league. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we now turn our attention to next time out, and in the next round we make our way to the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, the home of British Motorsport and the British Drivers Racing Club, the BDRC, and well, the racing action for round number 7 will be getting underway in real time on what will be Wednesday the 20th of May, but not fret, because we'll bring it to you as if it were live on Saturday the 30th of May, and for our final sprint race round we'll see how the story continues and how our drivers will set themselves up ahead of our season finale, the second of our feature races in Belgium at the circuit of Spa-Francorchamps in early June. But as we emerge out the other side of Imola, what we've definitely seen is that Ryan Otis seems to be the man to beat, now becoming the first repeat winner overall in Pro, and for James Logsdon, he's definitely slipped the ball, and therefore his championship lead, whilst it stands tall at the moment at least, is looking under threat. Meanwhile, in the Prime class, Tom Bryce making a third win of the season, and Glenn Bratton chasing him furiously, but understandably there's very little that separates the two other than a mistake here and there. But how will the story continue? Come tune in next time to find out how it does continue at the Silverstone circuit. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, we have been the Middle of the Pack Racing League. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh. You've been tuning to a Paul Walsh production. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and as always, most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.